Caroline Hill. I'm Editor-in-Chief of Legal IT Insider, and I'm here with Jonathan Patterson, who's Managing Director and Head of Development at DWF Ventures. Hi, Jonathan.
Hiya.
And Simon White, who's Principal Consultant in the Data and Analytics team at DWF 360. Hi, Simon.
Morning, Caroline.
Thank you so much for joining me. So we are here to talk about the launch. Well, there's a bunch of different stuff we're here to talk about, actually. We're here to talk about the launch of your data analytics tool, Ivy, which we've been working on with the Alliance Manchester Business School, but also just a bit about the work that you're doing generally around data analytics, and I know you've been quite busy behind the scenes. So, but first of all, to introduce you, JP, first. So, Managing Director, as I said, so DWF Ventures, for anyone who doesn't know it, you're sort of the ideas factory. Is that a fair description?
Yeah, that's pretty much right. Yeah, so we specialise in taking ideas from first point right the way through to something to test, would be the simplest way of describing it. So yeah, research and development is the posh title. Ideas factory is probably the one that we'll go with.
I like Ideas Factory. And Simon, so you're helping clients to devise and deploy data-driven solutions. I didn't just read that out. My own words. And you've been in the insurance sector since 1997.
I have, despite my looks, yeah. I suppose the easiest way would be to describe my job is to do useful things with data. And the word useful is probably the important one there, because it's distinct from interesting. Interesting is great, but useful is what really pays the bills for insurers. So that's what we try and aim for.
I like that. Yeah, no, and I sort of talk often about, does it solve a problem? Oh, no, but it sounds really good. Sounds amazing. What problem does it solve? Well, we just really like it.
Yeah, and it looks nice. So, you know.
It looks cool. Great UX. Do they need it? So you've got, and in terms of your two groups, you've got similar, your separate groups, but you obviously overlap a lot. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, so Ventures normally sits at the kind of front end. So, you know, what's the idea? What problem is it solving? Who needs to be involved? And then if there is a data dimension to that, we would bring Simon and the team in quite quickly as subject matter experts. That would be how it works. And obviously, Simon sits in 360 currently, and 360 is a separate software development business. So they specialise in creating risk management software, and of course, risk management software platforms gather a lot of data. So the kind of that's the key where Simon works from the software side on the kind of Evo products in 360 as well.
Okay, all right. So in terms of, and I know so we're going to talk about Ivy first. I know that's something that you've been more involved with, Jonathan.
Yep.
But, you know, obviously, Simon, we're going to come on to talk about some of the work you've been doing more specifically. But obviously, both of you, I'll be interested to hear both of your takes. But first of all, so Ivy, you've been working with the Alliance Manchester Business School. You've created and launched Ivy, it draws on historic DWF data, which is based on previous settlements and strategies, which you're then using to create effectively recommendations over things like value for your insurance clients. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, that's a really good summary. Yeah, it was designed. Obviously, it was a knowledge transfer partnership, so it was a formal partnership. It was 2.5 years actually from beginning to end. And in the beginning, we were looking to see how far you could go with data-driven automation in that area. So it's, you know, the exam question was sort of how far can you go with current technologies, current techniques? You know, actually, is it all hype and you can't really do much useful? Is it possible to be fully automated? You know, literally press a button and you know whether that case is going to settle or not, and for what value. And I think where we found ourselves as we went through the Ivy framework with the university is that it's augmentation. So it can be really, really useful in terms of giving your experts the right information at the right time to kind of make their judgment easier and more consistent. I think that's what I'd say.
Oh, I've got lots of questions coming a bit more into that. But so tell me about what you've what you're using, like how you created it, what platform and what tech you're using to sort of, is it your own stuff? Have you been working with third-party tech?
Yeah, so part of the deal was we worked directly with the University of Manchester's Alliance Business School data analytics team, and what's good about a knowledge transfer partnership is the way you structure it, you actually get a full-time data scientist sat in your business, and she was with us for 2.5 years, absolutely mind-bogglingly clever.
And I've written about it, but I can't remember her name.
So that was Maya, and she was with us for the length of the contract. So she actually did a couple of things. She built the actual Ivy algorithm and kind of tool, if you like, using sort of kind of proprietary stuff. And then the hard bit for us was that was the difficult bit, but we then had to integrate it with our data sources. So we've got in insurance pretty long-standing case management system where all of our data is stored. So that was the bit where we worked. Our IT team worked really hard actually to kind of make sure that what Maya created could sit and work and fit inside our sort of existing estate. So it's quite rare actually, because normally we would partner with a third party provider. We tend to be a sort of a buy rather than build, and do it as a kind of a partnership. But because it's effectively an algorithm, Maya made it. And to this day, I still look and think I'm not 100% sure what you've done and how that works, but I'm going to go with it because it seems to do the job.
So is it just the? I mean, I know that if at any point you think too much information to say, but is it just because one of the things, the challenges for law firms is obviously been trying to make sense out of a whole bunch of unstructured data, and there's an awful lot of work that often needs to go on behind the scenes in order to be able to create sort of analytics that there's an expectation that you can. Is that fair to say? Is it because it was from the case management system? Has that made the task easier? Is it just drawing data from the CMS? Does it draw it in from other sources in order to create the sort of intelligence that you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, it's historic data, so it would be all of the data coming out of our own kind of system, if you like. And if you think our position in insurance, from a claims perspective, we've been doing that for a very long time, and in some ways it pays to have had a case management system in place for a very long time actually. So I think that's why we were able to do it, I think, and others might not have been able to, because we'd kind of had those structures and that system in place for a while. And there's, I mean, I can't remember the number of years, it's well over a decade's worth of data we could utilize. But interesting enough, on your question, the first 6 to 9 months, it felt like, might have even been longer than that, was all about data quality. You know, is this usable? Is this configured in the right way? And you know, you sort of sit there and you think, oh God, 2.5 years to do this? What? You know, we should be able to do it. And then you realize, you're like, are we actually going to be able to do anything other than work out how to clean data in 2 years? It is a big job. And again, we had teams of people working very specifically on that with Maya, but it did feel like once we'd figured out that Ivy was what we wanted to do, because the first 3 months of a KTP is basically agreeing the parameters of what's possible.
Right.
So you go into it with an idea, if you like, and the first few months are about trying to agree exactly what's possible. And we did that, and then after that, it felt like a big chunk of the time was thinking about, where's the data coming from? What is it? Is it reliable? Do we need to do anything to it before we can use it? And I wonder whether that's why people kind of lose the will on some of these, because it is not glamorous, that bit. I mean, it is just
that's an understatement for somebody who's involved in it myself. I can tell you that is an understatement.
Are you involved in this part of the exercise in terms of making sure that the data? Because I've, as you can imagine, talked to a lot of people, and you're absolutely right that this is where some people start to lose the will to live. But do we tell Simon, was this an area that you sort of were able to exercise your professionalism?
I've certainly had some input in it, Caroline, and certainly with Ivy, my main role in that was actually meeting with Maya very early doors into the KTP, because I suppose my skill set, because I've got the insurance background, the technical background, was kind of introduced Maya to the challenges that insurance companies faced. And obviously, I know our data set quite well as well, and I know its limitations. Data quality, you'll know yourself, is a massive issue for pretty much every organisation out there. So yeah, involved. I suppose I was indirectly involved in cleaning some of that data up, because with the best will in the world, when you try and categorise data, you can always do it better. So, as JP says, very unpleasant job at the best of times, but it's absolutely critical, because that will basically decide if your project succeeds or not, if you get your data quality right.
Yeah. Yes, and I guess there's a limit to how much we can drill down, because there's so much you need to. If you're making these predictions, you need to make sure that you're absolutely confident, aren't you, that one thing is not mistaken for another, right? That you have, and there's an awful lot that goes into training the algorithm to make sure that this is the same or this is not the same, and it's putting it at its most basic.
Yeah, and again, structurally, we're quite fortunate because we've operated in insurance as a sector for a while. I think insurers have been big on management information. Right. So actually, they've required us to report using data for quite a long time. So actually, in some ways, we understood quite a lot about what was possible, what wasn't. Where were the grey areas in terms of accuracy and things. So I think we were fortunate. We had a bit of a head start, as well as the case management system, actually having a BI and an MI team who spend most of their working lives working with the data that comes out of that system. I think we were quite fortunate. Again, I don't think if you didn't have that capability, I wonder whether you would have kind of been able to get to where we got to. Those two things were definitely useful in terms of being embedded in insurance for quite a while. We probably had a bit of a head start over somebody who wasn't, I think.
So I gave a talk at an insurance conference, and I was doing my homework a little bit, I was actually thinking, do you know what? It really struck me how far ahead the industry is, and a lot of the things that people are trying to achieve outside, because of the volume, because of the pressure on margins, because of all of these things, because of the ability, because it's repetitive. Some of it's quite repetitive. It really struck me quite how far ahead the insurance sector is.
Yeah, particularly claims. I think insurance litigation claims. I think they've been doing a lot of the things that maybe we're thinking about doing in contracts now. They've been doing that kind of thing for a decade.
Exactly. Exactly. So in terms of how the information is presented, so is it, and this I guess comes back to what you started to talk about how much you can start to automate it. So is it potentially going to be, how will it be presented? Is it a part? Have you already made it part of a workflow? Can you use it effectively to already start to triage what happens with work?
Yeah, so the rollout, it will sit in our kind of claims team's desktop, if you like, and as they work through a particular type of claim. So obviously can't say too much about it, but it's aimed at a specific a type of claim. So it's not a universal application. It's aimed at a certain profile of case that comes in. So when somebody in a claims team gets one of those, they effectively have got an additional button, if you like, box inside their screen that would just allow them to use Ivy to do that kind of preemptive, what do we think at this stage based on historic patterns and behaviour. And the idea is that it does quite a lot of the work that the human would normally need to do, which, if you imagine in a sort of a fixed fee environment, is really helpful. So it definitely doesn't at this stage replace. It's designed to sort of augment, speed up, make it easier. And I guess that was a critical judgment as we went through the KTP about if we literally are going to create something at the end of this, because a knowledge transfer partnership, the idea is that you actually create something near market and valuable as they describe it. So you can't just say, well, that was a really useful piece of research, we might use that at some point. You've got to actually create something where you can measure the value. that was a pretty critical part of it, because deciding that sort of that point where how far are we going before it starts getting into the theoretical rather than the practical.
Interesting. So I mean, that's really interesting. And I want to come on to talk about, might as well speak now about the partnership with Alliance Manchester Business School. But just can I just so I don't forget, like when you talk about measuring the values, what does that mean? So are you having to effectively do an ROI, or what does that mean?
Yeah, you do. Yeah, I mean, if you think about Innovate UK, it's ultimately government funded, so the measurement criteria around it are really strict. So at the end of the project, and you get a while because obviously there's a lag from us going, yes, we've done it, yes, we can put it on people's screens, but then they've got to use it for a reasonably prolonged period before we can agree. But yeah, we've got things like settlement times. We've got a dashboard of, I think there's 6 that we've agreed with our operational teams in terms of 6 measures, if you like, and then obviously depending on what kind of case it is, different sort of, it's like a graphic equalizer type thing. You'd want to see different things come up. But yeah, so we're going to run that for at least 2 years and constantly measure those numbers. And obviously the more data set you've got, the more you understand about what's happening. But the early signs are pretty good. We've been quite pleased with in terms of what we set out to do. It looks like it's pretty close to what we hoped. And it's one of those where you don't want to get too excited because it's still very early. We're sort of not even 6 months since we finished. So I think we'll allow people to get really excited 18 months, 2 years, if those patterns are looking similar.
Yeah, interesting. And it's good discipline, isn't it? I mean, with the ROI, so sort of sometimes you don't want to be put off in terms of, I've heard lots of different schools of thought, like you don't want to be put off from innovating. Sometimes it's quite hard to measure ROI, but it's a really good discipline to get into.
I'd say this, Caroline, the days when you could sell a product as this is really good, and that's it, are long gone. People don't want that, because the people in insurers who we're actually, I suppose, selling to, for want of a better phrase, they have to report upwards, usually to their board, to say, if we spend X on this, what's the Y value? And you've got to be able to quantify Y as much as you possibly can. And sometimes that's quite straightforward. And what JP's described in terms of Ivy is actually one of the more straightforward ways of measuring things I've seen. Sometimes it's far more assumption and model based, but it is absolutely critical, because effort versus value is what everyone asks about these days. And people don't mind a high effort if the value at the other end is higher again, Yeah.
So I mean, just before I want to come back to Manchester, but because so you obviously you were Ivy, which I know Jonathan's more involved with, but you deal with IDA, don't you? So
IDA, yes.
We can't that lady's name, which is instrument, as you just said, instrument data and analytics. Before we carry on with Manchester, just describe what that means and what you do.
I suppose it's an umbrella title to try and solve insurer clients' problems, usually in the claims environment, with data. So essentially what we need to do, what we do as part of it, is establish what are those challenges. And the challenges for insurers, certainly in the field of claims, the variance of the theme. They know there's bad things in claims that are costing them more money than they need to cost. And it could be things like fraud is a good example. It can be opponents, claimants, listers behaving badly in a whole range of ways that adds extra cost. So the challenge for IDA is to understand what are the causes of these extra costs for insurers. How do they manifest themselves in big data sets? Say, what does bad look like here? Is it X? Is it Y? Once you understand what bad looks like, what are the commonalities in bad? Is it certain other firms who appear on claims? Is it certain parts of the country? Is it whatever it may be? And you can kind of create the perfect storm of what a bad claim is going to look like. It might be from part of the country X. It might feature this type of claimants list, and it might feature something else. If you know all that, when new claims come in that match bad, you've got a good idea of how they're actually going to play out. So IDA covers things like risk scoring and algorithms at the point of a new claim. So we can tell insurers, we think this is a bad one. It's going to behave badly because of all these features. But critically, this is what you do to stop bad. Because if it's just a data bit that just says this is bad, and we just walk into the sunset saying, hey, we've done our job here, do with it what you like, that's only half the solution. So the solution actually comes from our lawyers to say, well, these are the legal strategies. Once you know you've got a bad claim in front of you, this is how you stop the bad behaviour. And what the legal strategies do, you'll either stop the bad behaviour at source, And it's effectively saying in many respects to the other side, if you do this, we're going to do that. They either don't do this or they still do this, but then it gives you big arguments at the end of the case to kind of hammer them on costs. So that's IDA in a nutshell. There's loads of different variant things within there, but it's the key to the Caroline is, I think, the user experience and the design elements of it. So we've got data. How are we going to give this to a user to help them make better decisions quicker? Because that's what costs you money on claims, you know?
You're creating your playbook, creating a very detailed playbook, really, aren't you? Which is
very much so. And a lot of it, because insurers would love to tackle every single bad claim they possibly could. By the way, there's degrees of bad, so they're not all just bad or good. There's all kinds of things, but they have resource constraints. So what we do with IDA is we create products that the insurers can scale up or scale down to find bad. So they might say to us, listen, we've got 10% of resource to deal with bad. So just make sure this gives us the 10% worst of all of our claims. But what happens if that 10% becomes 15% soon because they've got more resource or anything like that? We found with IDA, insurers want bespoke products. They don't just want what my competitor down the road's got. They want something that we need that's attuned to how we operate things. And that's where its real advantage lies.
Interesting, really interesting. So let's come back. So Manchester. So you've already talked about the knowledge transfer partnership and Innovate UK. So just to recap for anybody who's not, so these Innovate UK, it's the UK's innovation agency. It's not a government department, but it's funded by the government, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
The idea is that really they've been very active in recent couple of years in terms of investing and driving these kind of partnerships with educational institutions such as Alliance Manchester Business School. So do you think so obviously, so you said, I was going to ask you how it works, but I think, you've obviously, you had a data scientist from the university who was with you, and that's for 2 years, and they work with you hand in hand, and you have to come up with a specific product, or at the beginning, you sort of flesh out what it's going to look like at the beginning.
So there's different, I guess there's different vehicles. So Innovate UK funds innovation across many industries, but the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, which is a government-driven initiative around the future of work, effectively, has narrowed down to professional services and financial services, and the use of sort of emerging technologies that are going to change the way we work. So there's been a big focus and quite a lot of funding that filters down into universities working with professional service companies, and then you've kind of got a range of different choices depending what you want to do. So there's funding you can get from the Research Council if it's just trying to sort of create a theory, hypotheses, concepts. There's a knowledge exchange, which is sort of know-how, but you don't necessarily have to come up with anything. And then the KTP, Knowledge Transfer Partnership, is very much, we're going to work together for a bit longer, but the deal is that we create something that's valuable and measurable. So you move past theory into actually, we're going to bring this to market and use it. And that's the Knowledge Transfer Partnership. So you basically get 2 teams. So a team on the DWF side, multidisciplinary, team on the university side, academically, so different academics from across the business school. And then the glue in between it is the sort of data scientist in this instance, who sits and works inside DWF, embedded into the team, works with us, like an employee would, but he's basically supervised and supported by the university team. And
it's interesting. So you said that you normally would build, not buy, but this is sort of shifting that on its head. Do you think that's just particular to this, or do you think that started part of a trend now that I'm going to come on in the time I've got left to ask you a bit more about how you're growing your own internal capability? But so do you think, is there a trend again amongst law firms, do you think, towards build, not buy? Are you sort of going to end up competing with vendors, or what do you think it's going to look like?
I hope not, if I'm honest. Certainly in our area, I think if we can buy or partner with a best-in-class vendor, we will, because we've run our own software business for nearly 10 years now, and we know the challenges that come with the investment model that's needed for that, the the retainment and attraction of staff into a software business that sits inside a law firm is not easy. So I think your proprietary stuff has got to be very, very niche. So for us, we've got a very specific proposition to clients with 360 products, which is our own proprietary platform aimed at very, very specific use cases of claims management, health and safety incident management, risk management. And we've gone down that route because we think it makes sense in that niche for us to sort of have our own product, if you like. But pretty much everywhere else, our first instinct would be, can we find a really good provider, partner, vendor to do this with? Because ultimately software businesses create software for a living and they're really good at it. Law firms do law for a living and hopefully they're really good at that. But I worry a little bit when you start, a law firm business model is not massively geared up for software development.
And you're not able to do it at scale either, are you? Because they do it across. They can sort of leverage that breadth and depth, can't they? Which is much harder for a law firm to do. In terms of just in the last few minutes, I'm just curious as to how you're developing ventures in 360 though internally. So Simon, how big is 360 in terms of, just give me a basic idea of the resource you have in the team?
Where's it up to at the moment, JP? Is it about?
I was going to say I can probably do that because I'm a fit, like sort of ventures comes under my remit, but so does 360 ultimately. So we hover between 20 and 25 people in terms of permanent headcount, and then obviously in classic software fashion, we've got access to a number of more flexible resources, increasingly in lots of different locations for specific projects. But we've also got the leadership team. Ashley Moss runs that as CEO, and then we've got development capability, process analysis capability, and project management capability. And we've put a lot of the effort into the Evo platform. Since we acquired 360 5 years ago, 5 years ago. So we've kind of constantly invested in that platform, but we did a strategic review last year and reinforced the idea that it's a very specific play, if you like. So we use the product for claims management. So non-litigious claims, we use it as our default platform, which gives us an advantage in our claims business because we can kind of play about with doing things that you can't if you've just bought one off the shelf. And then we sell it to a customer base in that very targeted niche. So 360 feels like it's sort of in a good place in some ways. It's got its niche, it's clear on its proposition, it knows what kind of customers it adds value to, and importantly which ones it doesn't. And again, a bit like Simon said, we've got a really good joint proposition because you sell health and safety incident software, and we've got one of the leading health and safety law practices in the country. So there's the obvious. Again, we're not just making technology for the sake of it, we're making it in areas where we've also got legal capability.
I think this might have to be the last question, but how much are you getting the lawyers involved now? Because obviously one of the advantages of being within the law firm is you have the people who are actually using it in anger. So how much are you getting them involved?
Well, let me try this one, JP, if that's all right, purely because when I started out my data career, Caroline, one of my first jobs in DWF was to create something data-driven for the lawyers, and I did all that, and I told the lawyers, here's something that will make your life easier. Away you go and use it. It's fantastic. Nobody used it. And then I was thinking, well, why did nobody use that? Because it didn't involve them in the design of it or the concept of it or anything of it. It was a real painful lesson for us, but you learn most from me getting it wrong. So from that base, I certainly quickly learned to say, right, we want ideas from our lawyers. They're very close to our clients. They're close to the coalface. They know what's out there. But we don't just want to say, here's an idea, suggestion box, put it there, go away, thank you, we'll take it from here. We keep them involved right the way through the process. What's going to work? What does it look like? How are you going to use it? When are you going to use it? All those things. And as I mentioned before, the key to it is if we can use data, for example, to find bad or something like that, what can we then do about that? The full solution, not half a solution. So the lawyers are then involved again at the back end with the designs of the strategies or whatever the legal side may be to make use of what the data or the technology has told you. So to summarize it, absolutely invaluable. And my advice would be, in a law firm, don't try it without the lawyers.
Yeah, and all I would add to that, because I think that's sound advice, is actually the other good thing about our model now as DWF is it's not just lawyers we've got. So we've got an incredible business in Mindcrest who've got 20 plus years as an alternative legal service provider, and then we've got connected services, which is other business services. So we've got other professionals who come at so actually for insurance we've got claims professionals and we've got insurance litigation lawyers. So actually we almost get like the best of both worlds coming together. So it again definitely involve the lawyers, but also think beyond the lawyers into which other capabilities and professionals have you got that can contribute.
That's a really good point, and we've got to wrap up. But and with Mindcrest, they've got a big presence in India, haven't they? Where they're actually testing new technology as well. And no, that's it. Right, listen, I've enjoyed chatting to you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Speak again soon, Simon and Jonathan. Thanks
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Caroline.
Cheers.